Okay, much better. Okay, guys, thank you. So I've been doing this for 20 years, um, progressing along with my technical knowledge and doing a little more work eventually to a point where I am very satisfied. I do about 20,000 pounds, about $70,000 worth of work. Do a lot of different crops, and I do also winter work, um, which I enjoy as well. I'm just going to move along, and what I'm going to do, and I just push the next flat slide, see if it works. Okay, yes, it does. What I would like to do first with all of you is to introduce my system, which is a no-till system, um, and organic as well, and then we can actually focus on weed management. But the part of a lot of the no-till is completely uh, helping the weed as well, the weed issue. So I think the more you learn about no-till, the more it's easy to understand the weed management part of it. I got my original inspiration mostly from a guy called Fukuoka. Some of you might not know about him. I really recommend you to. It's a quick read to get One Straw Revolution and read it. It's really inspirational in nature. Okay, I'm moving on. All right, let's talk about no-till. Well, no-till means no machinery, no really messing around with the soil. We leave the soil structure completely undisturbed, working essentially with our rakes and surface tools for everything we do. And I'm not seeing my slides, but uh, what I do essentially is I use a lot of different tools. We'll look at different technologies that allows me to deal with my crop without having to plow or to use a tiller. Um, what that does essentially is something very critical for me, which is to optimize the soil biology of my soil and to utilize the power of microbiology to grow my plants. So my focus essentially is the soil, and beyond that, the life of the soil. So I'm always thinking about enriching that bioactivity that is so critical to for my plants and my yields. Moving on. So another aspect of no-till is, which is really something sometimes forgotten, is the fact that you have to care about compaction. Uh, if you do not till, what happens is over the course of time, with the impact of weather and impact of people and machinery, you actually have an issue that your soil might compact itself. And then you have an issue with not growing plants, having issue with aeration of the soil, and water is not going to be coming through your root system very well anyway. It's a big issue. So you have to really create a system that allows compaction to not happen. And you do this using a lot of different techniques, such as dense planting, covers, a lot of covers, and a big one is mulch. Moving on. All right. The third building block is organic matter. You need to feed that soil life. It's very critical to do so. And I do this with a combination of things. I use manure, rabbit manure, once a year, and the mulch is a huge part of it too. I use about 500 bales of straw on my farm, which is a very small farm. That goes back to the first slide I forgot to tell you. I'm really dealing with a very small surface of land, in total about half an acre, that is actually cultivated. So that surface is constantly my big uh, objective, is to always keep it as covered and protected from the effect of the weather as I can do it. And I also use cover crop to that effect. The organic matter has to always be kept healthy and high. And in 8 years of production, I'm really happy to see that the organic matter level of my farm has actually grown from about 3% originally to 5% currently. That's really a big deal for me. Okay, moving to number 4, mulch. Now, mulch is almost the keystone of all this. It's not just a source of organic matter, but of course it is huge source of moisture. And since we're talking about weed management today, it minimizes weeds throughout the season when used. And also it protects against compaction. Number 5, moving on to the next slides, cover crops. I use cover crops. I rotate them on my farm. 1/4 of my farm is in cover crops all year long. So I take out 1/4 of my farm and I use a series of cover crops. I use oats and clover in spring, and then I use a lot of buckwheat in summer. And then that one zone that has been in cover crops during that year just returns to cash crops. And the only zone, there's one zone that I keep separate from that rotation, and that's my high tunnel zone, which is treated separately in a different system. Number 6, next slide. Another component of the system is the fact that I use permanent beds and permanent path system. So no rows, of course. This is really a big garden that I'm showing you guys. But it could be like, people ask me if this can be scaled up, and I say absolutely. I'm doing 5 acres worth of space, and it could certainly be scaled up to as many acres as you want. Permanent beds, again, low compaction. You never step. You can see my trainings on the right picture there. Very careful about not being on the beds, always working from the path. And I have strings actually. I'm kind of a little bit of a control freak at that point. I have strings to make sure that people remember that this is where you are not supposed to. You're not supposed to cross and work from the path. Okay. So all of this creates a beautiful environment, very low in weeds, very rich soil. Moving on, Patrick, if you can. Next slide. Yeah, okay. And then finally, the drip irrigation is also kind of always logical with everything else I presented to you. Minimize against compaction, and of course minimize weeds as a much better at weed control than overhead irrigation system, and also keep moisture level high. So that's really moving on to the next slides. All right, so this is, now I'm going to have I think it's, can we just go back and forth, Patrick? Because I have, yeah, and now move on again. Because I just can't see, I guess 2 slides together. Can you move to the next slide again? No, going back forward. Forward again. Okay, now I'm going to focus up. No, going back. Go back one. Okay, what I'd like to do now with you for the next 10 or 15 minutes is to talk about every season. Now I'm going to focus on weed management and see how that works with the rest of my system, which is I just presented to you. Let's start with winter. Winter in my area is essentially November to March, and there is a couple. I have a split personality in winter. I have an outside situation where most of my farm is, and also have a high tunnel. So let's look at the outside first. One thing that is critical to absolutely shut out the whole weed cycle, which took me a while to come up with, is that as I finish my previous year, which is around October and November, I absolutely, what I do is I shut out my whole system by completing the whole bed surface by layering the whole bed surface with a layer of mulch. So if there is already mulch there, for instance, if it's the end of peppers where it's already mulch from summer, then I don't have anything to do. I just leave the bed in place. Now, if it is a fall bed where I have been doing some lettuce, and you'll see why I open up the beds in that case, where when it comes the end of the year, around October, November, I will actually bring mulch in the beds and will guarantee that way to find a perfect situation. As you can see, this picture was taken all these pictures have been taken coming up this year. So this is a picture I've taken probably a couple of weeks ago, and you sort of see that the beds are really very quiet. There's nothing there except for the old layer of mulch that came either from last year or from October, and also a layer of manure that comes in January. So what you're seeing, and actually this is the cover crop zone. So you see in the forefront maybe some leftover sorghum that I've used in summer. Again, a very quiet place to start your spring gardening. Moving on. Okay, now on the inside, it's a different picture, but again, I want to show you how I deal with weeds in that situation. Now, weeds in winter, they actually are an issue for people out there that have tried to do winter work under tunnel or not. You probably know about chickweed, maybe not, but I say it's my #1 issue, and maybe fescue too. So what I do essentially, I rake my beds in late fall, early winter, and I start with my plants, kale, lettuce, and as weeds start to take over and start to get bigger, which usually happens towards the late summer time, February and March, what I simply do is, if it hasn't been harvested, the case of lettuce and a lot of, I just harvest the heads and that's it. If it hasn't been harvested yet, I will bring the mulch around the plants. And you can see that example pretty well on the left side. You can see that the mustard plants are, again, taken about 3 weeks ago. In January, February, as they were becoming weedy, I just took my mulch, which is, I haven't mentioned that yet, but it's straw, wheat straw in that case, and I just will smother the surrounding of the plant until the mustard plants are just isolated in the mulch and completely weed-free. Does that take care of the weed? Absolutely. The chickweed will actually die or will be shut out underneath the mulch, and the mustard or the kale or the Swiss chard or the bok choy, anything that haven't harvested will just flourish out of the mulch. So if the bed has been harvested, or maybe, well, I'm not going to, I just don't think I have the time to do so. What you can see, again, this is a picture on the right from about 3 weeks ago. Now, in the case of lettuce, this bed was not weeding up, which is kind of showing you that my beds are very quiet overall, weed-wise. But I will not do the mulching over these lettuces. I will simply harvest them at their big size without having to cultivate any at all. I mean, I will not even go in there once. I will actually have a plant that will be able to grow weed-free the whole time without cultivation. That comes from the Notill system. Okay, and then that's enough for that. Moving on to the next slide. Now in spring, which spring, well, let's call it March to May, I do something which is unique. Of course, as you can see, my system is fairly original and unique. I will do something important, which is I will open the bed centers. My beds are 4 feet wide. Now you remember that has been shut out during the winter, so there's absolutely almost no weed coming in except occasional, fescue things. And I will park whatever has been all this organic matter, which is a combination of manure, old mulch, new mulch, and I will park it onto the shoulders, which is on the side, 1 foot side of the beds on either side. and I will create an opening which is about 3 feet wide where I will do all my work in early spring. Um, Now we're talking about lettuce, cabbage, onions, whatever. And then I can direct seed in there or I can transplant. That is important because of the soil needing heat to reactivate itself. Remember, it's all about soil biology. Occasionally, the one thing I will need to do here is actually to add some nitrogen from the clever meal. So I want to just briefly say that. But again, very low weed situation to start with, and after one raking, absolutely no weed, I'm ready to go. And in that case, I want to show you my bed of onions, which are typically weedy types of crops. Well, you can barely see that. On the left are my new plants, my onion plants, just being trenched in. And on the right is about, I think I could read the days back. It's too small. But a few weeks later, you can see my onions, same bed. Okay, this is last year. Absolutely doing very happy. But what I've done again, which is just like I've done in the high tunnels in winter, I have actually gone into the plants midway between those two pictures and added the mulch through the plants for a finish without any weed. So no cultivation whatsoever. Again, I just wait about, let's say, 4 weeks until my onions get bigger. And then what I do is I bring the whatever old organic matter has been standing on the shoulders, bring them inside the bed, and then cover up with an additional layer of mulch for a complete shutout. Next slide. Same exact story. I just want to give you another example of crop. Oh, Patrick, can you do that? Thank you. Same story this time with cabbage. Same year, last year, just give you last year. On the left, you can see the cabbage, again, midway here. I'm about to do my overlayering of mulch in those plants. So the plants had a nice start from the original transplant, and then on the right, we're a few weeks later, the mulch has been put in, and they will be finishing in the mulch very happily, and then they'll be ready for, the beds will be almost ready for summer. Moving on to summer. Summer is the simplest weed management trick of all. I mulch everything. So some beds already have mulch in it, but the plants have been harvested, so it's a matter of completing the mulching. And I just transfer my plants into that mulch. It could be anything. It could be peppers. The only exception to the mulching rule is lettuce. I don't recommend lettuce, mulching lettuce, because vine rot. So in that case, I have a different technique, and you can see that I use shading cloths. I do a lot of summer lettuce. So mulch everywhere, mulch under the eggplants in the high tunnel, mulch under the squashes, mulch. And no cultivation. Again. Oh, I just pushed the button. Patrick, can you move on? Now we're going to get to fall. Fall is kind of an interesting situation. You have to reopen the beds for lettuce because, again, if I want to plant, let's say it was a bed of cucumbers and I need to use that bed for lettuce, which actually that might be the case here. You have to clean up. Do a little bit of reset, I call it. Make sure the lines. This is a good picture on it. You see the strings. You see the mulch, the old plants. By the way, another thing I like to mention is that absolutely no composting. In addition to doing almost no cultivation whatsoever. So that's two huge pieces in my system that absolutely create no labor, no need for any work. So what we do is everything happens in place. The whole composting, the whole decaying, and the whole, feeding of the soil life is made in place in the beds through those systems of the shoulders. So you see the shoulders are being parted out again, and all this combination of old plants and manure and it all happens in there. And then on the right, you see my lettuces going in, same bed, and being very happy there. Now, in some other situation in fall, we just plant in a leftover summer mulch, like scallions will be planted in the mulch, because I use, at that point, I use clumps of scallions, clumps of leeks, and also use clumps of bok choy. I try to do a lot of transplant in the mulch as well. So those are the two techniques. Okay, going on to, I think, oh, and this is my last slide for you today. I want to kind of make an impression on you that this whole system between the Notill and mostly based on Notill is very efficient with weed management, and also very efficient in terms of low labor input. Therefore I am saving a lot of labor on all these tasks I don't have to do. I mentioned cultivation and composting. So if we look at labor, I just want to give you the picture of a typical picture for my farm. And I want to bring it back to dollar of sales, so it gives you a feeling of proportions. I'm assuming that I'm paying about $10 an hour, which is about the case for my field labor. My total hours that I dedicate to my field work every week is about 60 hours, taking into account everyone, including myself. That's assuming about $60,000, and this is only talking about regular season, so excluding the winter months, because that's a little different. My ratio then becomes that my percentage labor content in my sales about 30%. 30% in terms of cost. Actually, this is not the real picture, because actually don't pay myself this way. I actually do a lot of the work myself. I love this too much to just supervise and look at my workers. So it happens that actually in my true, this would be if you only hired people to do it and you didn't really get involved. If you do get involved like I do, I'm about worth two workers on average, and that means I really only need $9,000 worth of that labor, about half of that, as much, which means my labor content or input is 15% of my sales. Now, that's very efficient, I feel. I think I know that for sure, because I compare myself to some other friends farmers, and they're always a little bit, puzzled, sometimes a little upset, maybe. Anyway, but if you extend that to the total efficiency of my farm by including all the other savings that come from no-till, obviously huge saving from no machinery, no input, no gas, no maintenance, no insurance. That makes me very efficient on the other costs of farming because of that lack of machinery. So if you add both the efficiency in labor and efficiency in other costs, then my total cost of doing business is about 35%. It's 15% on the labor side, and that's 20% on the other costs. So my profit margin is around 65%, which I'm very happy, which allows me to not work as much and go home and be with my family. And that's how I like to leave it to you, Patrice.